The abyssal poeticity of the dream and chaos as an archetypal spiral. The finitude of interpretation as horizon. The interpretation of dreams can reach only a certain point, thereby revealing the radically finite nature of the interpretive enterprise itself. And this is neither accidental nor the result of failure or deficiency on the part of the interpreting subject. On the contrary, it is a discovery, perhaps the most radical discovery, that human thought can make when turning toward itself. That the very horizon of interpretation is finite, not as an incidental characteristic, but as a constitutive element of the interpretive movement itself. Interpretation does not uncover a pre-existing meaning that was already there, already formed, already hidden, simply waiting to be disclosed. It is not an archaeology of spirit. Rather, it is a movement that recreates what it interprets, transforming it and being transformed by it, within a reciprocity, without beginning and without end. What we call the finitude of the interpretive enterprise is therefore not an external limit that interpretation accidentally encounters along its path, but an internal boundary that interpretation itself carries within it as its very mode of existence. Every interpretation, even the most penetrating, the most subtle, the most sensitive, always leaves behind a remainder, a darkness that is not illuminated, a depth that cannot be reached. And this remainder is not merely what has not yet been interpreted, something perhaps a future interpretation might reveal. It is that which is radically uninterpretable, that which escapes every interpretation as the very condition of its existence. Chaos. The topology of a primordial impossibility. The dream springs forth from the chaos of the unconscious, or perhaps from the chaos of the world itself. But what is the relation between them? And what chaos are we speaking of? The chaos of mythology, of poetry, of philosophy, or the chaos studied by science and confronted by technique, which are themselves systems of classification, classifications of a structure that is chaotic, or perhaps already classified? Are we referring to the lightning flash of the abyss, that is, to the world itself, or to the chaos that surrounds and traverses us? These are not simple questions. They are traces of a thought attempting to approach something that fundamentally escapes it, something that can only be grasped obliquely, by casting a question into the darkness and listening for an echo in return, different, transformed, unrecognizable. We may say that all these questions possess a common yet suspended and invisible center, while differing according to the directions toward which they orient themselves. The chaos of mythology is the chasm from which gods and world emerged, a primordial state that does not chronologically precede order, but coexists with it as its invisible foundation. The chaos of poetry is language before language, sound before the word, image before meaning, where what is spoken and what is unspeakable coexist in radical indifference. The chaos of philosophy is wonder, the fundamental uncertainty preceding every certainty and every system, the unavoidable question that overturns every answer. Science and technique, by contrast, treat chaos as a problem to be solved, as a deficiency of knowledge to be compensated for, as disorder requiring organization. In this movement, they create classifications, structures, imposing upon chaos an apparent order, an apparent coherence. Yet, these classifications are always classifications of a chaos that is already no longer chaos, a chaos already subjected to a primordial transformation by the very thought attempting to understand it. The chaos studied by science is not primordial chaos, it is already interpreted chaos, already inhabited by thought. If chaos is the primordial rupture from which everything emerged, and if we inhabit the chaos dwelling within us, then we speak of chaos while already being regulated by a world that itself is regulated. Here there exists a radical circularity that cannot be bypassed. The thought-thinking chaos is already situated within a world, a language, a tradition, a history. There is no thought beginning from nothing, no thought existing before every pre-understanding, no thought dwelling within chaos before already being inhabited by the world. This does not mean that chaos is fantasy or a mental construction lacking correspondence with reality. Rather, it means that chaos is always already transformed, always already inhabited, always already interpreted, and that this transformation, habitation, and interpretation are not secondary acts imposed upon primordial chaos, but are the very mode through which chaos exists for thought. The world as inevitably interpreted becoming, the world is inevitably interpreted, that is, transformed without there being or ever having been an authentic and immutable state or becoming. This statement, which may appear as a simple reminder of interpretive relativity, conceals within itself a much deeper consequence. It does not merely claim that each person interprets the world differently, or that there is no singular definitive interpretation. It says something more fundamental. There is no world prior to interpretation. The world is the place where interpretation dwells. Without interpretation, there is no world, but only the undifferentiated chaos of matter. And if there never existed an immutable and authentic world before interpretation, then what is the world? It is the accumulation of all interpretations that have brought it into being the place where these interpretations encounter one another, interact, collide, agree, and disagree. The world is a field of interpretive dynamism, an endless movement of transformation without beginning and without end. Interpretation transforms and places itself into question. It becomes itself the question of that which is not, but unfolds as time. Interpretation is not an object, a stable structure, or a system. It is movement, becoming, unfolding. And this unfolding coincides with time, not with time understood as a linear succession of moments, but with time as the way being becomes, transforms, and extends beyond itself without ever completely abandoning itself. The temporality of interpretations and the archetypal spiral. All interpretations are temporary shelters that will become ruins, while another interpretation awaits its time to become the place and moment of the world, before itself being led toward destruction. There is something Heraclitean here: perpetual flow, ceaseless transformation, decay as the condition of renewal. Yet this is not precisely Heraclitus. It is not a low struggle between opposing forces, but something deeper, the recognition that every interpretation carries within itself the seed of its own destruction, that its very formation already contains the beginning of its dissolution. Every interpretation, in order to exist, must delimit, trace boundaries, exclude something. Yet what is excluded never disappears. It remains as what was not spoken, a silence beneath words, a shadow beneath light. This silence accumulates, presses forward, seeks expression until interpretation can no longer sustain itself and collapses into ruins. From its ruins emerges another interpretation, which says what the previous one could not say, while itself excluding something else. And so the movement repeats endlessly. Everything that is and becomes, without distinction between being and becoming, is never complete or whole. Within lack and deprivation, they inscribe a mark upon the archetypal spiral of the world, repeating itself differently. Lack here is not simple absence, it is the very driving force of becoming itself. What is incomplete moves towards something, seeks something, tends towards something, without ever arriving, without ever becoming fully fulfilled. And in this impossibility of completion, in this perpetual movement without finality, lies the way the world exists, as an archetypal spiral repeating itself differently, never returning to the same point, always opening toward something slightly altered, slightly unrecognizable.